Hello, Chip GT here, and in this video we are going to cover how to get your buttons on your cabinet lit up and running. I'm going to walk you through a few different approaches that give you the options of either being on the cheap end but it being a little more complex, or being a little more expensive but easier to install. Then I'm going to show you what I did for my cabinet. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and coin in and push that start button. First, I need to be clear that I am not monetized and I don't receive any support other than the one-time birthday gift that I got for the artwork for my cabinet. None of the companies or products that I'm about to showcase have sent me any kind of monetary incentive to talk about them in any way. My opinions are 100% my own. You may not agree with them, and that's okay. The idea behind me making these videos is to help you learn some of the lessons that I have learned along the way of making a Vpin cabinet. With that said, the best place to start when lighting your buttons is to look at the hardware you have versus the hardware you need. Many years ago, I built an arcade cabinet / storage closet. I ended up purchasing 10% more than what I actually needed, and I ended up getting clear Spectra Eclipse illuminated bezel push buttons with Helio 9 high output RGB LEDs with wires and a nano leaf switch for $8.49 per button. That may seem like a lot of money for one single button, but it's more than just that. It's a button, the lighting system, and the actual micro switch that when you push the button triggers a trigger. These LEDs are 5 volts only, but they can be set to thousands of colors if you get the clear push button option. It's also important to know that the LEDs do not have a control chip. They are considered dumb, meaning they have a ground, a red, a blue, and a green wire specifically targeted to cover the red, blue, and green LEDs. All LEDs in the chain are either all on or all off. When you consider a controller with these LEDs, that means that channel 1 is red, channel 2 would be green, channel 3 would be blue. That can be taxing on a pin skateboard, especially if you want to use the outputs for other things. And it wouldn't work with the smart lights that we use for the WS2811 Wemos controller. With that, it narrows us down to a few controller options, but the two most popular devices are the LED Wiz and the I-pac Ultimate. If you already have a pin skateboard and you're not trying to max it out with bells, chimes, and other DOF accessories, there is a newer option that is growing in popularity from Cleveland Software Designs. It is much easier to set up and install and has a few different configurations but comes at a premium price. The trade-off for all these controllers is that the cheaper the price, the more complex it is for you to set up and configure, but the higher the price, the easier it is to install. I'm going to cover all three of these options for you so that you can get a better understanding of what might be best for you. The 32 LED Wiz takes 5 volts in and pushes 5 volts out. So if you're trying to run a 12 volt LED off of this board, it's just not going to work. It contains 32 outputs, but when you talk about the RGB channels, it really only supports 10 dumb RGB LEDs and then leaves you with 2 open ports that you can use for something else. The difficulty to install this is moderate to high because you have to download several different pieces of software. You have to configure it. It's kind of a pain in the butt. You have to know a little bit of coding and be able to set it up and configure it in a not so user-friendly way. There's also not a whole lot of support out there, and there's very few guides, and there's not many videos of people actually using this because it's just complex. It is on a cheaper end though at $44.94, but for other considerations, your computer can support 16 of these things all hooked up to one computer, but each one of the LED Wizes requires its own separate address so that it can interface with your computer. This type of option just isn't going to work for me because I need to have 12 lights lit up. That's my goal, is I want to have 12 RGB LEDs lit up. So this option is not a candidate for me. The Ultimarc I-pac Ultimate Controller is something that I already have on hand. Many years ago when I built my arcade machine, I bought 2 of these things thinking I could interface them in a specific way, and it just didn't end up working out for me. So Like I said, I got this one on hand. It's a really nice controller. It takes 12 volts in and pushes 5 volts out to the lights. It has 96 ports for RGB LEDs, which comes down to 32 separate dumb RGB LEDs. It's low to moderate on the install process and setup. It does require you to download some software, but the user interface is really easy to use, and it's easy to follow along with the instructions and the videos that they have online and figure out how to get this controller up and running. And the cost is right around $108. The I-pac may seem a little overkill, but if you want to free up some space or some ports on your pin skateboard for more outputs and for more DOF functionality, this is a nice controller that you can hook your buttons up to, and it completely takes button pushing out of the mix for the pin skateboard so that you get more outputs. The Cleveland Software Design expansion boards are a great solution for the pin skateboards. They take in 12 volts and they push out 12 volts. So if you're running a 5 volt LED on this, it's gonna blow up, so don't do it. It's got plenty of outputs. It gives you 5 RGB LEDs, and then it gives you 4 just regular LEDs. This is great, but it's not going to work out for me because, like I said, I need 12 RGB LED lights to get my cabinet the way I want it. The nice thing with this solution is it's extremely easy to install. It's literally plug and play. There's lots of support videos online, several guides, tutorials, all kinds of great stuff from CSD. Their customer service is great. If you reach out to them through email, you get contacted very quickly. I know this personally because I had some issues with some other DOF stuff that I purchased from them, and they were able to walk me through how to get everything up and running very quickly. This solution also gives you the opportunity to either have all the lights on, or for an additional cost, you can have all your lights light up with DOF. The difference is just having the lights turn on, you're looking about $96. If you want to have it enabled with DOF, then you're going to have to spend a little bit more money to get an additional expansion board for $136. But this is a one-stop shop. You'll get you'll get your 12 volt buttons from them, you'll get the expansion board from them, and you'll get all the wiring and harnessing and everything all in one package, and it's incredibly easy to set up. It's also important to note that there are several other options for controllers, and the full list of DOF-enabled controllers is easy to find in the DOF config tool. Simply log in, click on My Accounts, and you should see the full list of controllers on the side here. You may be able to get some of these other controllers to work with different lights, and to get an idea of what you might want to light up and what buttons can do, you really need to click on Stats. And there are some differences that you should understand. So you may see something like Flipper, RGB Flipper, and then Flipper MX. What are these differences? Flipper is like a regular just 12 volt either on or off light. That's it. It's like a standard light that you would find in a regular pinball machine, or like a general illumination light. All right. RGB Flipper is a flipper that can change colors, but it's dumb. And this is like for any table, like you may have one table that says light up yellow, light up red, light up blue, light up whatever. That's what that is for. And then you have Flipper MX, which is for smart RGB LEDs. There's really not a lot of buttons out there that support Flipper MX, but they are starting to come out. You may see like a little ring that you put on the inside of the button, and that ring will light up in a pattern, like it'll spin around in a circle or counterclockwise in another circle. That is something that I'm not really interested in doing. It's not really that much more expensive. It's just not a lot of tables really support this, and it's easy to figure out which one of those is more popular by clicking on Stats, and then you can come down here and you can look at, okay, here's Flipper. So all these tables have some kind of general illumination light for a flipper. The list just goes on. It's almost every table that's out there. All right. Then if you scroll down and we find RGB flippers, the list shortens a little bit. So see how it went to 987, and now if we go to Flipper MX, it's still 961. The only thing is it's not going to be an interactive spin around in a circle kind of light. It's just going to be on in one color. If you're curious as to how to determine which light to go with, just go to table config settings, and I already know for a fact that the Stern Star Trek limited edition supports a fire button for RGB, LED, and MX. So oops, so we'll come down here, Star Trek limited edition, and look at that right there. There's the launch button. So this is just a regular on-off button. It can blink, and that's the coding for DOF so that it knows when to blink it. If you have an RGB, which is more what Stern has in that cabinet. Oop, I passed it. So there's the RGB flipper button with the coding and how to light it and when to light it and the different triggers and when to light it. And then there's also the fire button MX. Gotta find it. Fire button MX right there. So it's telling us red on. There are some extra coding in here. There's some extra coding in here for an MX button, but I am not using an MX button. I'm just using a dumb. So either way I go, I can have it on off or have dumb colors or have smart colors. But I know that either way I go, MX is not going to work because there's not a smart chip inside of the LEDs. Only the dumb RGB is going to work for me because that is what I'm going for. So setting up the ultimate I-pac controller for me is going to be fairly easy. First, you want to come back to my account. You want to come down here to where it says Ultimate IO device. That's going to be for the I-pac. You change this to however many devices that you have, right? And then from here, like you can see, I've got the Pinscape board there. I've got the WS2811 there. And then now I've got the Ultimate IO device for the I-pac. Then when I come over to port assignment, I can come over here into the drop down tab and I can select which device I want to set up the buttons for. So we're going to select the Ultimate IO, and this board, it splits it up into two separate sides. So this is like the right side, this is the left side. And the way that I have the board mounted into my cabinet, I'm going to start down here at the bottom of the board, which is port 48, and work my way up. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to have my RGB flippers. So I'm just going to come down here, and here I'll select nothing. And now I'll come down and I'm going to try to find RGB flippers because that's what I have there. Next, I'm going to have my exit button, my genre button, my how to play button, and start button. Now, how to play in the genre button, that's not what they're going to do for me. They're going to do other things that we will talk about in another video. So for my start button, it is an RGB light, but I'm treating it as if they're dumb because I want my start button to always be yellow. There isn't an RGB start button option in here. So that is why I went with start button, and all you have to do to make it yellow is change the red port, which is going to be port 43, and the green port 44. You just put start button, it'll turn on red and green and make yellow. For the next one, I wanted it to be purple, and this purple one is, you know, it's going to be more of a violet than it is like a purple. But once again, red and blue. How to play, boom, boom, and it'll be blue. For genre, I wanted it to only be blue, so I only have the blue port selected. And then my exit button, I just wanted red. So there you go. You just have to do it in intervals of 3, knowing that you've got red, green, and blue. Now, if I wanted to come in and change the color in the future, I could make it white. I could make it, you know, a few different colors. I'm not talking thousands of colors here. I'm talking like your primary and your secondary colors, or white, or nothing. So you don't really have a whole lot of options when you do it like that. For the fire button, I have an RGB fire button when I'm playing the Star Trek game and I'm in one of the modes and I know that it's all the lights on the table are supposed to be red. I want the fire button to be red, knowing that I'm in that mode, or however Stern has it set up. It mimics Stern perfectly, or mimics the Star Trek table perfectly. And then the last one that I have is for my coin in option, and my coin in option is kind of funny because rather than inserting a coin to coin in, you push the coin return. I put a trigger on the back side of the coin return, and when you mash that in, that's how you get money in my cabinet. So that could have been just only red, but it was kind of dim, so I wanted it to be brighter, so I just made it white. And then I have my final button, which is my launch button. It's right underneath of my my plunger, and I wanted that to light up, and it'll flash when I'm playing different tables that require it versus the plunger. The plunger lane, like for the plunger lane will go up and down on my MX right side light strip, and then if it doesn't require a plunger, it'll flash the launch button instead. So I think that's kind of a cool feature. Same thing with coin in. When you first launch a table, the coin in button will flash saying, hey, push me. And then once you push it, the start button will flash, and then you push it. So now that this is all set up, I click save, and I'll come over just a little bit. And then, like I've done in many videos before, where we hit generate the config file. This takes about a minute or two, so I'll stop here and we'll come back. Okay, so that got done downloading. I'm going to click to open it. Here's the config file. And then I'm going to open up this is my pinball folder, or my pinball drive, my direct output, my config file, and I'm just going to select all of these, copy and paste them over, replace all. You can also hook up 12 volts to 12 volt lights to this. You just follow this as a guide, and I don't like mixing 12 volt LEDs with 5 volt LEDs. Each system should be separate and on its own, but if you wanted to do this, you could. I just don't necessarily recommend doing it unless you absolutely have to. I will be using a couple of pins down here, and conveniently on the other side here, this is the I-pac configuration utility. It's very user friendly. You just have to download and install it. I'm only using these 4 pins. I've disabled all the other ones. All these other ones, click disabled. So I'm going to use this pin as my V key, which will be for view when I'm playing Pinball FX. So this will allow me to change the view, and that's one of the buttons on the front. And this one is going to be the left alt key. Now I'm using the left alt key as a shift trigger for Pinvol. If you're not familiar with Pinvol, or you want to understand it more, Way the Wrench has a really good tutorial on how to get it up and running very quickly. So I highly recommend that you watch his video. I'm not going to cover Pinball, just know that for my I-pac controller, I plan on using the left alt key as a shift trigger for Pinball, so that I can switch and use my buttons and my arcade cabinets to change the volume and audio options for my tables. These other 2 buttons, this is the end key. I needed an extra button on the inside to simulate opening up a coin door. Now normal pinball machines, when you open the coin door, there's a switch on the inside, and that disables the high power. This is literally a switch you have to push in order to access the buttons on the inside of the coin door. So I added this as an extra button, and then I have the left Windows key as another shift key that I may or may not use in the future. I just have it there just in case. Once you get these buttons all set up, all you got to do, plug your board in using the USB cable and hit force board to reconfigure. It'll come down and say it's successfully configured. Setting up your button can seem a little complex, but it's actually pretty easy and straightforward. So here's the light that I got from Groovy Game Gear, and it comes in this little light housing like this. Here is the nano leaf switch, and then the button. So for the switch, you're going to put ground on. I just solder them, but you hook up ground to the top, and then your switch to be, when you push the switch in, for it to close the circuit, you need it in the middle pin. And then for the light, this mount actually goes right inside of the button, and you see how there's like a keyed hole right there? Well, there's a tab right there. It goes into the keyhole, twists, and locks. All right. And then the button itself goes with the switch here, goes up towards the button, and you line up this hole with the top and this hole with the bottom tabs that are there. I'm just going to put this nice and in between these wires so it stays nice together. I always start with the top, and you just slide it into place and it snaps in. Now when we go to insert this into the button, it locks, it holds, and this little tab here pushes down on the switch, closing the circuit. So for the lights, they come naked like this if you get them from Groovy Game Gear, and they're pre-stripped and pre-tinned, which is nice, but there's no connector at the end and there's no option for a connector at the end. So you'll have to get yourself these Dupont connectors. So you have a piece right here that's metal that you'll hook the wire up to, and then the Dupont connector, you just slide this right in, and that way it'll slide into the pins. But the kits that I have online for you come with the installation tool, but I do not have the installation tool. So when you're going to do this by hand, you want the wire to kind of sit where these square flat tab is. It's really hard to see because this is so tiny. You want the wire to sit there, and then you want to fold the pins down and around it. So I'm just using a pair of pliers here to crimp down on metal wire. It's nice and snug. And then there's these little triangular shaped hooks at the top. I just kind of crimp them down and squish them together a little bit. So, and the idea behind this piece is that it's grabbing the wire so the connector doesn't come loose and it stays nice and tight. Like that. So that's how you do it by hand, but the tool is much easier and much faster. Alright, once you have that set up, you want the flat part facing down when you go to insert it in the hole. So I do ground, red, green, blue, and it slides right in and locks into place. That's how I make my connectors. And then we go over to the rat's nest down there where everything is kind of crazy right now because I haven't had a chance to do any wire tidying. But get a better shot here. This is where I've mounted my controller right here, and all the lights are hooked up right there with the exception of the one that we just did, so I'll hook that up. And then this middle section here, these are for the buttons. I've got the 4 wires that come off here that go down to the control buttons. It's kind of hard to see, but I hooked this up to the 12-volt power, and then there's the USB right there. So I'm not using a lot of these pins. Like I said earlier, this is pretty overkill, but this is a great lighting controller option and button setup option if you're looking to free up some ports on your pin skateboard to do more cool DOF things. Okay, notice that the flipper buttons are purple. My coin in, the one that you need to push the coin in, is lit. Notice that the start button isn't lit, but when I push the coin in button, it should light up. And then I have my purple, my blue, my red, and then my other flipper button is also purple, which is what this cabinet is supposed to be set up for.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Her ongoing mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life forms and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before.
Weapon systems and shields on standby.
Dock control reports ready, Captain.
Welcome aboard.
Nero. Destroy the drill. Klingon battle. Prior directive. Space jump. Save the Enterprise. Nero. Destroy the drill.
Damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a pinball wizard.
Save the Enterprise. Prior directive.
Underestimate the mistakes. There can be no interference with the internal development of alien. Come on, Jim! They're right behind us!
No high score today. Well, that wraps up this video. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you learned something
Hey, Dad.
from this. Oh, yeah?
This game for you. I have no idea what it is.
You don't know what it is?
No. Probably should. Like,
Next video.